interim budget, but there's plenty of corporate action that we need to contend with as well. Stories around Baiju's, Paytm Payments Bank and much more. But joining me now to talk about the interim budget and the outlay for the many ministries that he steers is Ashwini Vaishnaw. Mr. Vaishnaw, many thanks for joining us here on CNBC-TV18. Appreciate your time. There's a whole host of ministries that we need to go through, Mr. Vaishnaw, but let's start with the Railway Ministry as well as the Capex allocation that's been made for the Railway Ministry at 2.52 lakh crore rupees. It's higher than the previous year. Your take on that?
Absolutely. Over the last 10 years, you would have seen our Prime Minister Shri Narendra Modi ji has put very clear focus on increasing capacity in railways, making sure that the safety is given topmost priority, and on bringing new technologies like Vande Bharat, like Amrit Bharat. So all this today has reached a level where we can take the railway system to the next level. In last 10 years, we have added 26,000 kilometers to the railway network. Last year itself, it was 5,200 kilometers, which is like adding one Switzerland to railways. This year again, we are adding 5,500 kilometers, which is like adding one more Switzerland to railways. So in today's budget, two major announcements have happened. First is 3 corridors and second is upgrading 40,000 coaches. These 3 corridors are very, very important for railways. In these 3 corridor programs, we will be adding about 40,000 kilometers of new tracks. That is like adding the entire network of Germany into Indian railway network in the next 6 to 8 years. These 3 corridors have been designed in a very scientific manner over a period of last 2 years, where all the origins of cargo, origins of passengers, all the destination, major consumption and demand centers for cargo and major destination points for passengers, all of these have been plotted in a very scientific manner on the PM Gati Shakti portal, and the existing network has been analyzed in light of the demand which is there for cargo as well as passenger movement. So basis this, about 450 projects have been identified, which can be new lines, doubling, tripling, quadrupling, creating flyovers, creating bypasses. All kinds of different projects have been identified, worth about 40,000 kilometers and investment of about 11 lakh crore. So together, these 3 corridor programs will create enough capacity for us to increase the passenger transportation from current level of 700 crore a year to 1,000 crore and cargo transportation from 1,500 crore to 1,500 million tons to 3,000 million tons by 2030.
Mr. Vaishnaw, the expectation in the markets is that perhaps we could see an uptick as far as the capital allocation is concerned, even for things like the railways. Do you have any such hope?
This is very huge Capex allocation, 2,52,000 crore. This is like, I think when I speak about this in the global forum, people just watch with amazement. $31 billion investment in 1 year. It's phenomenal. Most countries look at 2 billion, 3 billion kind of capex in their networks. So this is phenomenally huge capex.
Well, Mr. Vaishnaw, since you spoke about adding a couple of Switzerlands, let's go back to the conversation that you and I had in Switzerland just a few weeks ago in Davos on the sidelines of the World Economic Forum's meeting. And there you had said that there was a logical case to be made for a cut in import tariffs. And that decision has been taken. It's been taken outside of the budget, with a cut coming in to 10% from 15%. Do you believe that this will now drive the export growth beyond the import substitution that the government has been focused on?
Absolutely. There are 2 factors here. One is trust. Second is simplification. In the last 10 years, the way our Prime Minister Modi ji has conducted the foreign policy and economic policy, there is huge amount of trust on our country. Today, India is a very trusted country. So trust shoring is the in thing no longer friend-shoring or near-shoring or reshoring. Trust-shoring is the end thing. And so many companies which we met during the Davos World Economic Forum, so many of them want to set up mega electronics manufacturing clusters, something which can run into 100 or 200 acres or 300 acres also. So that kind of interest is there. So this simplification which has happened in the custom duty structure, because if there are multiple rates, then it's very easy for misinterpretation to happen around which component should be classified as what, right? So that problem is now out, and very clear focus is there on now moving towards export-led growth in a trusted geography.
Mr. Vaishnaw, as far as the Capex is concerned of the previous year, how much of that has already been utilized for railways? Are you close to fully having utilized what was allocated?
82%. We would have done even 90%. But I mean, it's better to pace it out. We are already at 82%.
Already at 82%. On the telecom receipt side, there's a sizable number that's coming in on that front as well. Your take on the growth of the sector as well as the upcoming auctions and what the roadmap will be.
Data consumption has increased from about 14 GB per month to about 19 GB per month. And the spread of data connectivity has significantly increased. With the 5G, more than 400,000 towers in the entire country. I mean, that's phenomenal. That's more than maybe 2 continents combined. It's more than that. Second largest 5G ecosystem in the world. So it was quite natural that telecom revenue will increase with this spread of the services and the deepening of the reach of telecom services throughout the country. So it was quite expected. It is moving in that line. And the second point, what was the second point? Sorry.
On the upcoming auctions, the roadmap.
Oh, right. So we had very major auction last year, as you are aware, where practically a large chunk of the spectrum which was available has been already auctioned out. Now very small chunks are left, and the demand also for new auction is very limited. For new spectrum is very limited. We are working on, so as we promised, there will be an annual auction plan. So we are working on it, and very soon the auction notices should come out. It will be a significantly lesser or a smaller auction compared to the previous one, but this will meet the critical requirements that the industry has.
Mr. Vaishnaw, let me end then by asking you, on the semiconductor side, there has been an allocation made in the budget for semiconductors as well. How confident do you feel? When we last spoke, you said that 2 or 3 further announcements are expected. How confident do you feel about closing those out?
100% confidence.
All right, Mr. Vaishnaw, we will leave it there. Appreciate you joining us here on CNBC-TV18's Budget Headquarters with your take on the railway capex and, of course, the IT, electronics and ministries that you also look after. Appreciate your time and thanks very much indeed. That is Minister Ashwini Vaishnaw there, adding Switzerland and Germany. KV Subramaniam back with us, our budget editor. It's been a long day for you as well. So
that's for you too.
Absolutely. So let me get you to wrap up for us where this now leaves us, how much it moves the needle as far as growth is concerned, and what it means for the economy.
I think I'd stress 2 aspects. One, this budget clearly lays out a vision for India to record 7% plus growth in the coming decade. So I think the talk of Amrit Kal has actually been walked in this budget. And I will particularly emphasize three areas there. The 1 lakh crore allocation, which is 50-year, zero interest loans for research and innovation. I think that's extremely important. You would remember, we talked about the steps that needed to be taken on innovation. For the first time in 2020, India broke into the top 50 economies on innovation. We cannot become the third largest economy without us being at least in the top 10 in innovation. I think in that context, this is very critical. Second, the capital expenditure, the 11% increase is good, but I think there is scope for further increase because the demand for infrastructure, I think, still remains very large. Again, if you have to be an advanced economies, our infrastructure has to rival that of the advanced economies as well. So I think that's a second. And the third, the incentives that are being provided to states for them to actually invest in infrastructure and capital expenditure. I think there's been very good take-up of that. Last year, the 1.3 lakh crore provision of that 98,000 crores has already been taken up, and that has led to a 47% increase in the infrastructure by states, which is a very large number. So I think, continuing on that is, I think, very good. So net-net, when I look at, I think there's vision for growth that's articulated. At the same time, on the macro fundamental side, something that I, carefully watch, I actually think that it is a case of under-promising and very likely over-delivering, because, and the reason I say that is if you look at the 5.8% number, which is 10 basis points lower than the 5.9%, that actually assumes, and Lata was pointing out very well in the morning, if you look at the run rate for the tax revenues, that is about 14%, and yet the what has been assumed in revenue growth or what has been sort of put in the revised estimates is about 11%. So there's actually a likelihood that the actual, when the final number comes in, the FD will actually be less than even 5.8%. In a similar way, unless something, and I think it's possible that the full budget, the numbers may change, but we can only project based on numbers that we have currently. There as well, the conservatism is reflected. Though
Mr. Somanathan refuses to accept that. He says, we're not being conservative, we are being realistic.
Well, having worked with him very closely, I would actually, we would have discussions on this. I find that conservative. You would recall on one occasion, I think the budget had 10.5%. The economic survey had projected 11% nominal growth, and ma'am had responded to that as well in the press conference. So my sense is, and I actually am saying this, with conviction. If you look at 7% real growth and 4% GDP deflator, I think that translates into 11.3% of nominal growth. And with tax buoyancy having been about 1.5, 1.6 in the last decade, and especially this year as well, even a 1.2 tax buoyancy is actually conservative. And what is being assumed is 1.1. So I think with 1.2 tax buoyancy on 11.3% nominal growth will translate into 13% plus. So I think overall fiscal, if indeed 5.1% is achieved in the coming year, that means the path towards 4.5% will be something which will be a very credible one. And as I have mentioned earlier, I hope the rating agencies are looking at this, because given the kind of fiscal transparent path, consolidation path that India has achieved, I think it'd be absolute travesty if the rating agencies do not account for it.
And I asked both the CEA as well as Mr. Somanathan that question, whether they expect an upgrade, and they said they don't expect anything from the rating agencies. As Mr. Somanathan spoke about double standards, and he said, we know that they're not fair, so we don't expect anything.
I think that is, I would say that is out of the frustration, sheer frustration at the double standards that are actually, and I think here, for the benefit of our viewers, I must highlight that, as we had shown, the 5th largest economy in the world has never ever been rated BBB. And when you look at rating, that is actually a reflection of the ability to repay and willingness to repay. India has never ever defaulted. So the willingness to repay is gold standard, and all our debt is domestic. So, and GDP is growing so well, so the ability to repay is there as well. So I don't know what the rating agencies actually, what model they use. It is flawed. As a financial economist, I can say with absolute conviction.
Well, that is a matter of debate on another day, but let me also bring in Christian Guzman of Moody's Investor Service. Christian, always a pleasure. Many thanks for joining us, as you always do on Budget Day. Very aggressive fiscal consolidation roadmap being laid out by the Finance Minister, 5.8 to 5.1. What do you make of the glide path, and overall, your take on the budget?
Okay, well, happy to join the debate, but let's not get into that. But perhaps first, I have been asked all day, are we?
Want to, Christian? I'm happy if you want to respond to that.
It's not my place to respond to that. All I can say is that most countries have in fact not defaulted. So lack of a default history is not really a marker of a high credit rating. But
right.
But perhaps just talk
yes,
about
overall, Christian. Talk about the fiscal consolidation roadmap.
Yes. I do believe that we have given credit for that for the fiscal deficit consolidation and the progress that has been made. So indeed, with the interim budget that was announced today, there is a fourth consecutive year of narrowing fiscal deficits as India has emerged from the pandemic. But I think let's not lose sight of where we started. Prior to the pandemic, the union budget's deficits were actually well under 5%. So in the 5 years in the 5 years prior to the pandemic, that average was actually 3.8%. So we're looking at perhaps at a forward-looking basis, approaching 5%. We're still above where we were when we had India at BAA2. I think a couple of other things when we look at our fiscal assessment is the stock of debt. The stock of debt is also much higher than what we had seen when India was at BAA2. And I think the more important thing for us is debt affordability. And interest payments to revenue here again is in a much weaker state than it was prior to the pandemic.
Of the many announcements outside of the fiscal deficit reduction that came in, Christian, the Capex spend 11% over a fairly high base because we're coming off of record Capex allocation in the previous budget. What do you make of that and its ability to turn the needle for growth?
Well, indeed, we are very positive on growth. And so I guess to the point about our model and our methodology and our approach to sovereign credit ratings, we have incorporated the fact that that we do believe India is one of the strongest economies in the world. We do expect India to be the fastest growing economy amongst all G20 economies, not just this year, but also next year. So that part is really well recognized. What we aren't seeing so far, perhaps, is how that infrastructure investment that you asked about is really translating into much stronger private investment. We haven't seen that crowding in effect yet. Having said that, I think it does pave the way for that crowding in as some of the challenges facing the global economy today perhaps abate when we're thinking about, for example, the very tight global liquidity conditions on the back of tight Fed monetary policy, which we do expect to ease going forward. Now, I think also just with regards to capital expenditure as a share of total expenditure in the union budget, that has been growing. That is positive. That does flag a better quality of spending. At the same time, let's bear in mind what I mentioned about debt affordability. Interest payments, debt servicing on the very large debt continues to be even larger than the entire Capex.
Yes, that is something that you have pointed out as a concern previously as well, but the government is sanguine about that and its ability to pay. But Christian, before I let you go, there were a couple of new announcements that came in from the government in this interim budget, like a solar rooftop scheme, a new housing program, which of course the allocation has not been apportioned just yet. As we now close out the interim budget and look ahead at the grand finale, the final budget, what would your expectation be? Do you expect a significant change in these numbers?
I do expect the government will continue to communicate their commitment to fiscal discipline and working towards that fiscal deficit target. However, I do want to flag the very challenging global conditions facing India. Now, once again, these are global challenges, not just Indian challenges. This could be regarding the climate shocks, including El Nino, the perennial monsoon issues, as well as the potential for shocks to emanate from the current situation in the Middle East. So we may find ourselves in a situation in a couple of months' time where the government will have to act in a fiscal sense to address some of these issues. So, but as yet, we are still looking at a trend of fiscal consolidation being maintained even after the election.
Yes, that certainly is the hope, and that's what the government has signaled very clearly in its interim budget. Christian, always a pleasure. We look forward to seeing you again when the government unveils its final budget. Let's see if it is going to be Nirmala Sitharaman's 7th budget or not. We will have to wait to see. But thanks very much for joining us. KV Subramaniam, what an absolute pleasure it has been having you here on CNBC-TV18 as our budget editor. Thank you for all the behind-the-scenes look at what transpires in putting the budget together and for analysing in real time the budget, interim budget of 2024. We are going to take a break.
My pleasure too, Sharon.
Thank you so much. We are going to take a break. A lot more coming up. Don't go anywhere. We're back in a moment.